They commanded armies, orchestrated mass destruction, made decisions that cost millions of lives. And after the war, most people believe they were all severely punished, hanged or imprisoned. But what if I told you many of those generals escaped? That some were welcomed by governments, aided by priests, even reintegrated into positions of power. Yes, what happened behind the scenes of justice after World War II is far darker and far more real than school textbooks ever told you. While the world celebrated the fall of Nazism, a secret network was quietly at work, moving war criminals like pieces on a global chessboard. Clandestine routes, forged identities, and unexpected alliances allowed names like Mengele, Eichmann, and even high-ranking military strategists to simply disappear. The most shocking part? Some of them lived comfortably, protected by the very governments and institutions that were supposed to bring them to justice. This isn't just a story about escape, it's about organized impunity. And here's the strangest part. Perhaps the greatest silence pact of the 20th century wasn't between governments, but between us and our own memory. Because if these men remained free, who benefited from that? And why did no one speak out for so long? Today, you'll uncover the hidden escape routes, the forgotten trials, and the dangerous alliances that ensured freedom for those who should have seen only a prison cell. And by the time you finish this video, you'll never see history the same way again. The Nuremberg Trials and beyond. When the guns fell silent and the horrors of war came to light, the world faced an unprecedented dilemma: how to judge those who had engineered the chaos. The Nuremberg Trials weren't just courts. They were a historic turning point that redefined the meaning of international justice. 22 of the most powerful men in the Nazi regime found themselves caged, no longer warlords, but defendants before all of humanity. There, they weren't only judged for what they did, but for what they allowed to happen under their command. For the first time, the world dared to say, "You are not above the law." Wilhelm Keitel, the architect of blind obedience, and Hermann Göring, the flamboyant dandy of the Reich, faced sentences that didn't just silence them, they symbolized the end of an era. 10 death sentences were carried out, one of them, Göring's, preempted by his own poison, a final act of control. Others, like Albert Speer, confessed, perhaps out of regret or perhaps strategy. And some, like Franz von Papen, walked free, fueling theories of secret deals and cover-ups. Justice, though powerful, was not complete. And that's where another story begins. Meanwhile, smaller trials multiplied across Germany, Austria, Poland, and other devastated countries. Courtrooms echoed with the names of officers, soldiers, and local collaborators. Each verdict pulled at a thread in the web of atrocities woven over years. But not all the guilty stood trial. Many had already vanished, leaving only traces and names buried in secret files. And it's precisely there that the mystery begins. The story of those who fled and disappeared from the map. Escape and disappearance. While the spotlight of Nuremberg illuminated the most visible defendants, hundreds of others were quietly erasing their tracks across the shadows of Europe. Their escape wasn't chaotic, it was planned. With forged documents, defined routes, and even help from the most unexpected places. These escape paths, known as ratlines, became the passport to impunity for many Nazis. Behind these escapes were discreet accomplices, including sectors of the Church and the Red Cross. It was as if the world wanted to forget, even before it had fully remembered. South America became the new stage for this story, with Argentina as the main theater. It's estimated that around 9,000 Nazis and collaborators crossed the Atlantic, many under new identities, living as ordinary citizens. The network was so well structured that some even held public office, ran businesses, and started families. Among the most infamous were Joseph Mengele and Klaus Barbie, who lived for decades without being disturbed. The question remains, how did the world allow this to happen? Some say anti-communism was the perfect excuse. In the heat of the Cold War, the West began to see former Nazis as useful allies against Soviet expansion. Many of these fugitives had valuable intelligence, technical skills, or simply the right political connections. Some went into hiding, others were hired. The line between hunter and accomplice began to blur. And all the while, figures like Eichmann lived quietly until the day justice came knocking on a door in Buenos Aires. Specific cases, the generals who got away. Hermann Göring wasn't just a general. He was the face of Nazi pride and decay. Sentenced to death, he refused to be hanged like a common criminal. Instead, he chose poison, like the emperors of old. Wilhelm Keitel, obedient to the very end, faced the gallows as if simply following orders, without question. Each execution carried the symbolic weight of a regime that collapsed from within. But not all were punished with the same severity. Erich von Manstein, a brilliant yet controversial strategist, was convicted of war crimes, later released, and ironically, helped rebuild West Germany's military. Heinz Guderian, the father of the Panzer, followed a similar path. After imprisonment, he was called upon to advise NATO's new military leaders. It was as if pieces of the old Reich were being recycled for the new world order. Others, like Hermann Hoth, also served time and were quietly released. Time, politics, and military interest proved stronger than the thirst for justice. Many Nazi generals not only escaped harsh punishment, they returned to public life. Some died with honors, others in anonymity. And as their fates unfolded, a secret map was being drawn, pointing the way to South America. Escape to South America. Imagine for a moment a man condemned for unspeakable crimes stepping off a boat into the sunny ports of South America. With a new name, a new life, and zero consequences. It happened more often than you think. Argentina, under the leadership of Juan Domingo Perón, didn't just receive Nazis, it invited them, offering promises of citizenship and protection. It's estimated that around 5,000 found refuge there. It was the perfect paradise for anyone looking to disappear from official history. Brazil, Chile, Paraguay, and Bolivia also opened their doors, either willingly or conveniently, to welcome war criminals. Many arrived through the so-called ratlines, clandestine routes from Europe supported by members of the Church and the Red Cross. Walter Rauff, Josef Mengele, and Adolf Eichmann are among the most infamous names of this dark diaspora. They lived among neighbors who never knew who they truly were. And so, the past walked disguised through the streets of the present. The escape network was so well designed, it included official documents, diplomatic assistance, and even travel costs covered by sympathizers or complicit governments. History didn't end in 1945. It merely changed its setting. Many of those who escaped became pieces in political games during the Cold War. And all the while, Nazi hunters like Simon Wiesenthal searched the globe, chasing faces that had already changed names, and countries. Why Argentina became the main destination for war criminals. Argentina wasn't chosen by chance. It was the result of a hidden alliance, forged long before the war ended. As early as 1943, there was already a covert agreement between the SS and the Argentine Naval Intelligence Service. Fake documents were prepared with surgical precision, and Nazi agents received new identities as easily as changing clothes. When Perón came to power, that support became official state policy. To Reich fugitives, Argentina became known as the Cape of Last Hope. But it wasn't just about logistics, it was about ideology. Perón openly sympathized with the Third Reich, and his Argentina had deep cultural ties with Germany, Italy, and Spain, the Axis nations. This ideological alignment created fertile ground for welcoming war criminals with rhetoric, protection, and even jobs. High-ranking members of the Argentine clergy, like Cardinal Antonio Caggiano, facilitated meetings in the Vatican to coordinate the arrival of these men. It was a pact between power, faith, and silence. The lack of international cooperation sealed their fate. Argentina outright refused to assist the Nuremberg Trials or Nazi hunters. The country didn't just look away. It shielded its territory with laws and bureaucracy that made extradition nearly impossible. Nazis entered with new passports, and within weeks were fully integrated into society. But Argentina wasn't the only one to welcome these shadows. Other routes also led to the same final destination: oblivion. How the escape routes to South America worked. The so-called ratlines weren't improvised. They were meticulously planned routes, like secret trails for an army still on the run. They passed through Italy, Spain, Portugal, and the Nordic countries, all with one goal: reach a port and board a ship to South America. The most frequently used routes departed from Genoa, Rome, or the Alps, winding through monasteries and churches. With the help of clergymen and the Red Cross, Nazis received new names and passports, as if they were ordinary refugees. It was the machinery of forgetting, running at full speed. One of the most sinister paths was known as the Vatican route. There, priests like Alois Hudal and Krunoslav Draganovic became key figures in the operation. Hudal, for example, even wrote a book praising Hitler and was pointed out as the mastermind behind some of the boldest escapes. Documents show that figures like Mengele, Eichmann, and Stangl passed through his hands before vanishing into South America. In Rome, these men were met with protection, not prosecution. And it wasn't just religious figures who helped them escape. British and American intelligence services were involved too. The Cold War turned Nazis into valuable assets in the geopolitical game. Scientists, strategists, and informants were seen more as resources than criminals. The world traded memory for fear of communism, and in that landscape, justice lost its strength. But even decades later, questions still remained unanswered. Now tell me, after hearing all this, do you still believe justice was truly served after World War II? How many stories like these are still hidden, waiting to be uncovered? And more importantly, what does all this teach us about power, memory, and impunity? History isn't just the past. It's a mirror of the present. Because when we forget, we give permission for it to happen again. Maybe the most terrifying part isn't what they did during the war, but what they managed to do after it. They built new lives, escaped accountability, and in many cases, were treated as heroes by the very governments that claimed to stand for freedom. Does that bother you as much as it bothers me? Then don't keep this knowledge to yourself. Subscribe now to Brothers History, turn on notifications, and keep exploring this journey with me. Because here, we don't just tell history, we reveal what they never told you.